They told me I was part of the past, a relic in a world that demanded speed over substance. I sat across from Eli Maddox in the glass-walled conference room at Apex Grid Solutions' downtown Austin headquarters. Outside, the clouds pressed low and heavy, casting the city in a dull gray. Eli didn't even look at me as he slid a thick manila envelope across the table. We're pivoting. We need fresh energy, innovation, agility. All buzzwords, no meaning. The words severance package glared up at me in bold font, official and absolute. My name is Nolan Graves. I'm 45 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I was the lead systems engineer at Apex. 16 years of my life. 16 years building their infrastructure, creating systems that survived storms, blackouts, even a global pandemic. I nodded once. No protest, no scene. Just a hollow kind of acceptance. Across the glass wall, I could already see HR assembling, clipboard in hand, fake sympathy plastered across their faces. My career here was over, not with a confrontation, but with paperwork and buzzwords. I stood up, collected my few personal items, a photo of Maya and me on our old ranch, a battered thermos, a carved wooden model of a satellite I'd made during the early years. The walk to the elevator felt surreal, like the gravity in the building had shifted. As I stepped through the front doors for the last time, the humid Austin air hit me full in the face. They thought they were cutting dead weight. What they didn't know was that the true backbone of their empire had just walked out the door. The drive home cut through the heart of Austin, traffic light and streets shimmering under a misting rain. I didn't turn on the radio. No calls, no distractions, just the steady slap of the windshield wipers, marking time, one heartbeat after another. I thought about the 16 years I'd given them, the late nights patching server failures, the product launches that ran on nothing but caffeine and grit, the weekends I missed birthdays and anniversaries because no one else could hold the systems together. I had built Apex's nervous system by hand, and they had tossed it aside like obsolete wiring. When I pulled into the driveway of our ranch house, Maya's truck wasn't there. She was likely at the farmer's market, hustling produce and homemade goods like always. I walked inside, dropped my box of belongings on the kitchen counter, and stared at it. I wasn't angry, not really. What I felt was colder, cleaner, a sense of finality, and under it, a strange, growing freedom. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years, core licensing documents. Sitting there were the receipts, the copyright registration, the timestamps, the licensing agreement signed 6 months before Apex ever offered me a paycheck. The algorithm at the heart of Apex wasn't theirs. It never had been. They had leased it on a perpetual basis, tied irrevocably to my employment. Now that tie was severed. As I scrolled through the files, sipping my coffee, a thin, humorless smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. I hadn't burned the bridge. They had, and they would soon discover the cost. The original code lived on a portable hard drive, tucked inside a battered metal case I kept hidden in a filing cabinet at home. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Years ago, long before contracts and NDAs and equity splits, I had written the core framework of Apex's inventory and logistics systems on my own equipment, on my own time. The copyright, timestamped, and file with the U.S. Copyright Office bore my name alone. 6 months later, when Warren Blythe offered me a position at a fledgling startup operating out of a strip mall office suite, I had licensed it to Apex Grid Solutions, not sold it. A crucial distinction no one in the new regime had bothered to uncover. The perpetual license agreement was clear. Apex could use the algorithm indefinitely, as long as they honored the original terms. Modification without my written consent? Prohibited. Ownership transfer without renegotiation? Impossible. Severing my employment without a mutual agreement triggered a lapse in the license's guarantees. In other words, the moment they shoved me out the door, they had bet the company's entire infrastructure on a foundation they didn't actually own. A foundation I could, if I chose, let crumble beneath them. I wasn't planning revenge. I wasn't that petty, but I believed in being prepared. I archived everything twice, made backups to encrypted cloud storage, and verified the original copyright records one more time. When the systems failed, and I knew they would fail, it wouldn't be because I sabotaged anything. It would be because the only person who truly understood the architecture, and when the calls came, and they would come, I already knew exactly how I would answer. Calm, unapologetic, unavailable. The first cracks appeared less than 48 hours after I left. A minor system glitch turned into a cascading database failure when no one knew how to reroute the load balancers. By day 3, several major clients were reporting critical downtime, warehouses stalled, shipments delayed, entire supply chains freezing in place. The consultants Eli had flown in from New York scrambled to patch the bleeding wounds, but they didn't understand the deep architecture. They poked at it like tourists reading street signs in a foreign language, missing every nuance, every hidden trap. I watched the reports roll in from my kitchen table, coffee in hand, detached but not surprised. The phone calls started that afternoon. First came a junior project manager, voice trembling, then a former teammate, then Sammy Vega himself, leaving a desperate voicemail. "Nolan, the system's breaking down. No one knows how to fix it. Please just call me back." I didn't. I simply archived each message as they arrived. Each one another nail in the coffin Apex had built for itself. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. They had decided I was obsolete, remember? I let the rain patter against the windows and waited, patient as a fisherman on a still lake. By the evening of the third day, the headlines hit the local tech blogs. Apex Grid's logistics platform experiences widespread failures. Internal chatter from former coworkers hinted at total chaos. Client service agreements were unraveling. Emergency meetings ran day and night. Every consultant Apex had flown in was frantically trying to reverse engineer the system they didn't understand. I wondered if Eli Maddox was starting to sweat yet. He should have, because the deeper they dug, the worse they would realize it was. Without me, Apex wasn't just wounded, it was bleeding out, and the worst was yet to come. On the morning of the fourth day, a courier showed up at my doorstep with a thick envelope stamped legal notice. Apex's legal team wasn't wasting time. Inside was a dense letter accusing me of misappropriating intellectual property and demanding immediate access to all my personal devices for forensic examination. I smiled grimly, handed the envelope to my lawyer, and brewed another cup of coffee. They were desperate, scrambling to invent a crime where none existed. The only theft that had happened was theirs, stealing my time, my expertise, and now trying to steal my name off work I had built long before they showed up. By noon, Eli himself called. His voice, once dripping with corporate arrogance, now carried a tight undercurrent of panic. "Nolan, listen," he said. "We recognize your value. We'd like to bring you back on a consulting basis, $400 an hour. No hard feelings." I leaned back in my chair, watching the ceiling fan spin lazily overhead. "Appreciate the offer," I said calmly, "but I'm not available." "Nolan, be reasonable. This is a great opportunity for both of us." I ended the call without another word. They hadn't been reasonable when they shoved me out the door. Now they could choke on it. Over the next 2 days, the pressure ramped up. More letters, threats of lawsuits, whispers in the industry that Apex was preparing a smear campaign to paint me as a rogue engineer who sabotaged the company out of spite. My lawyer responded to each attempt with precise, brutal efficiency, submitting my original copyright registration, timestamped code samples, and signed licensing agreements to Apex's own board. The message was clear. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't breaking. By the 7th day, internal sources told me Apex's top executives were in full-blown panic mode. Not because of me, but because without my system, Apex didn't have a company left to defend. Every hour they spent trying to bully me was an hour closer to their final collapse. On the 7th evening, Warren Blythe called and asked to meet. We chose an old diner on the outskirts of town, the kind with cracked leather booths and weak coffee. Warren looked older than I remembered, his once blonde hair gone mostly white, but his handshake was still firm. Over a plate of greasy fries, he laid it all out. The venture capital group that had installed Eli Maddox hadn't bought Apex to build it, they bought it to dismantle it. Their plan was simple: sell the client lists, strip the technology, and shutter the rest. They needed me out of the picture because I was the only one who truly understood the machinery under the hood. Warren leaned in and lowered his voice. "Before I sold Apex," he said, "I added a clause to the sale agreement. If the core system fails for more than 8 consecutive days, I have the right to buy it back at a fixed price, $6 million. I sat back, stunned. They agreed to that? "They never read the fine print," he said with a wry smile, too busy chasing numbers to understand the value of the engine that drove them. It all clicked then. The rushed termination, the aggressive posturing, the fear now bubbling to the surface. They hadn't just fired me, they had tried to erase me so their asset stripping could go smoothly. And now they were choking on the consequences. Warren wasn't just offering information, he was offering a way back. Not just revenge, but restoration. If we moved quickly, we could trigger the buyback clause, take Apex away from the vultures, and rebuild it the right way. But we'd need help. Warren had investors lined up, but he needed me to come back as the technical architect of the future. I didn't say yes immediately. I had built Apex once before, at great personal cost. If I rebuilt it again, I needed to be sure it would be different this time. Smarter, stronger, fairer. The next morning, I met Warren again, this time in a private office downtown. Veronica Stein, the CTO of Polaris Nexus, joined us over a secure video call. She was sharp-eyed, confident, and direct. "We've been watching Apex unravel," she said. "We're prepared to back a buyout. $4 million from us in exchange for a 40% stake. Warren would cover the rest. The deal was clean, efficient, and powerful. But before I agreed, I laid out my conditions. No layoffs for at least 6 months, a 10% employee ownership program, and full creative control over rebuilding Apex's core systems. If I was going to return, I wasn't coming back as a caretaker, I was coming back to lead." Veronica smiled. "That's exactly what we want, Nolan. Real leadership, not a puppet regime." Warren nodded his agreement. "The board is bleeding money. They'll take the deal once they realize they have no other choice." Still, I hesitated. Apex had cost me so much the first time. Missed anniversaries, sleepless nights, distance from my wife. I couldn't let it consume me again. "If I do this," I said slowly, "I rebuild it my way. A company where engineers aren't treated like disposable parts. A company where loyalty is earned, not demanded." Veronica leaned forward. "That's why we want you." We spent the rest of the morning finalizing the terms. My lawyer drafted the documents to trigger the buyback clause officially if Apex's systems remained offline past midnight of the 8th day. Warren lined up calls with old investors who still believed in the original vision. Veronica's team prepared contingency plans to stabilize client relationships once the deal went through. Piece by piece, the same way Apex had been built the first time. One line of code, one brick at a time, only now it would be built to last and built to belong to the people who kept it alive. By the morning of the 8th day, Apex Grid Solutions was a battlefield. Internal servers were failing faster than they could patch. 3 of the company's largest clients had publicly suspended their contracts, citing unrecoverable technical instability. Rumors swirled that government regulators were starting to ask questions about Apex's data handling practices. Employees were walking out mid-shift, resumes flooding the local tech market. Eli Maddox was spotted storming through the office, barking orders no one could follow. From my kitchen window, sipping coffee, I could practically hear the walls of Apex cracking apart. It wasn't sabotage, it was gravity finally pulling down a hollow structure. By noon, the board convened an emergency meeting. Eli was terminated immediately, escorted out of the building while consultants frantically tried to stabilize what remained of the infrastructure. It didn't work. Without the core systems I had designed, and without the understanding to rebuild them, Apex was bleeding out. Investors began dumping stock, journalists picked up the scent of failure, and headlines screamed across the local news cycle. Apex Grid Solutions faces collapse amid system failures, leadership shake-up. Clients, board members, even former employees began reaching out to me quietly, asking if there was any way I could step in and save the company. I didn't answer, not yet. That night, the board chair himself called my lawyer, voice tight with desperation. They were willing to negotiate, he said, a full reinstatement offer, public apology, a generous consulting contract to bring me back in. My lawyer relayed the message, word for word, chuckling dryly as he did. They still think this is about you wanting your old job back, he said. But it wasn't. It is never about going back. It was about building something better with the right people under the right terms. I watched the clock tick past 11 p.m., knowing Apex had only 1 hour left before Warren's buyback clause became ironclad. I didn't lift a finger to save them. At exactly midnight, Warren's legal team sent the official buyback notice to Apex's board. There were no more calls, no more bargaining. The deal was locked in. For $6 million, half of Apex's original valuation, we reclaimed the company we had built from the ground up. I signed the documents alongside Warren and Veronica, our new partner from Polaris Nexus. Ownership of the company, and more importantly, ownership of the future, was back where it belonged. As part of the transition plan, I reinstated the original systems, restored stability to the client networks, and sent a simple email to the entire staff. Apex Grid Solutions is under new leadership. No layoffs, no fear, let's get to work. Walking back into the building for the first time was surreal. Half the office had been emptied, resignations, firings, broken spirits, but the ones who remained looked up when they saw me. Some clapped, some just exhaled in relief. Sammy Vega was waiting by the elevators, a tentative smile on his face. "You came back," he said. "Back," I corrected him. "Out, forward." In the main conference room, Warren and I laid out the new vision. An employee ownership program, merit-based promotions, transparency from leadership, no more ivory towers, no more treating engineers like disposable parts. Apex wouldn't just survive, it would become a place people believed in again, because now it would truly belong to the ones who built it. 6 months later, Apex Grid Solutions was almost unrecognizable in the best way. We launched Apex Quantum, a rebuilt platform combining the strength of the original systems with innovations we had only dreamed of under the old leadership. The product reveal filled the Austin Tech Convention Center, standing room only. Warren opened with a story about Apex's origins, Polaris Nexus. Then it was my turn. I stepped onto the stage and looked out over a sea of faces, clients, engineers, reporters, and friends. This isn't just about software, I said. It's about trust, about building something real, together. The applause was overwhelming, but it wasn't for me. It was for all of us, everyone who had stayed, fought, and believed. In the front row, I spotted Maya, her smile proud and knowing. Later that evening, Warren and I sat by the lake behind his house, fishing lines drifting in still water. The lights of the city shimmered in the distance, Apex's new logo faintly visible against the skyline. "Think it was worth it?" he asked, handing me a cold bottle of beer. I thought about the sleepless nights, the risks, the betrayals, and the rebuild, brick by brick, soul by soul. "Yeah," I said, watching the ripples spread across the lake. "For the right things, it's always worth it." The story of Nolan Graves reminds us that loyalty is valuable, but it must never come at the cost of self-worth. Nolan gave Apex Grid Solutions everything: time, sacrifice, heart. But when a new regime tried to erase him, he discovered a deeper truth. Real power comes from owning your work, your skills, and your future. Sometimes walking away isn't failure. It's the first step toward building something better, something that truly belongs to you. His journey teaches us to protect our creations, to know our value, and to never let short-sighted leadership define our worth. When you're prepared, when you know your rights, you can turn even the most painful betrayals into new beginnings. If you found inspiration in Nolan's story, or if you believe in the power of rebuilding after being underestimated, please like, subscribe, and share this post with others who need a reminder. Your work matters, your dreams matter, and sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success on your own terms.